You talk a lot about examples of how leaders have failed as well, or and they avoid conflict. Why do some of those CEOs kind of fail at their tasks?
Yeah, you read that part. Yes, you're talking about a public utility CEO who, so this happens. People get very uncomfortable with that. And I use that as an example of how important one of the second of the three qualities, subservience to purpose, is. Because your feelings have to be managed. These are human beings. They are absolutely human. I once spoke to the head of a publishing house who was talking about chief executives as being these sort of autonomous robots that don't care. And that's absolutely not true. They do care. They deeply care. But their feelings never supersede the purpose of what they're trying to accomplish, the mission of the company. And this individual you're talking about in the example of the book, he was so afraid of conflict that he was allowing his avoidance of that to interfere with the purpose of what needed to get done. So he had two factions in his company that were arguing with one another, and it was interfering with the ability of a newly merged entity to come together and work well. But he just let the conflict fester because he just didn't want to have the fight that needed to be had. So the need of the company to succeed was being put beneath his need to avoid conflict.
And then flipping it on its head, also some of the leaders you cited who are really successful have this ability to drive teams as well and create high-performing teams. How do they do that?
Yes, it's so much of this is about having a sort of understanding of that you're never going to figure things out and that you want to do it together, sort of bring things together.
And you mentioned about sense of purpose as well, didn't you? Connective sense of purpose.
Absolutely. So the fundamental principle that they follow is that we are creatures of never-ending desire to grow, that we want to learn, that's hardwired in us, this desire to triumph new activities. It starts at birth. And we have, I was looking at Piaget, the father of modern psychology, dealing with his colicky baby, Lucien, and how frustrated he was. And yet, when he put things in front of her for her to learn, she forgot all about her upset stomach. And
that's like the mobile in the cot.
Exactly. And then she'd get bored, and then she'd start crying again. So, and that goes throughout life, a desire to master new things. So these leaders are collectively trying to help their teams find ways to be part of triumph and in themselves sort of stretch and learn new things. And that collective is how they build these highly successful teams you're asking about.
And I find it quite fascinating as well, because in the book you cite why people don't give the people the opportunity. Why is that? Why do they turn their backs on those people that are doing a good job, or they're not getting the right feedback or performance measurements?
Yeah, part of the problem, I think, is that so often we see people as fixed entities. They're either hardworking or lazy or smart or stupid, and that's just how they are. So these leaders walk away because it's like you're a fixed entity. You are what you are, so I'll put you over there and you do what you do. And that's absolutely not true. I studied under Peter Drucker in the 90s. Yeah. And he used to open every question with senior executives with, how many incompetent people do you, in this room, how many of you have incompetent people on your team? And invariably everybody would raise their hand, right? And then he would say, were they incompetent when you hired them, or did they become so under your command? Which is the fundamental responsibility of a leader, which is to find the best self in all of their people, to not simply sit there and say, are you an A or a B or a C, but to how can I create a context around you that brings out your best self? What are you very good at, and how do I focus the team around that as a collective to take advantage of it? And that's extremely important.
And you also said at the beginning of the book as well, everyone has potential, they just sometimes don't know how to realise their own potential, and leaders have to help those people find that. How do they do that?
In so many different ways they do that. And I mean, so often there's Herb Kelleher at Southwest Airlines was famous for calling it looking for someone's stroke of genius. You're looking for what makes people excited, trying to flip that switch of engagement for them. So you actually, there is no one formula for it, but it comes from an internal attitude that you really want to bring out the best, that everybody can do extraordinary things. They are more changeable than we ever thought. They're not nearly as fixed as we used to believe. And that these are the principles that allow you to do so, these three principles that allow you to do so in a 21st century workforce.
And then Larry, who was the CEO of Honeywell, he said something about being on his deathbed, his mother saying, "I want you to fulfill your potential." So there's this whole thing around role models and people believing in others. How does that, you've also cited about parents or spouses as well as helping to support those people. How do you think that affects the mindset of a CEO?
Yeah, that was such a profound moment for Larry Bossidy, one of the great CEOs of the 20th century, talking so honestly, sincerely about the fear he had. One of the great CEOs of all time, the fear he always had of not fulfilling his own potential, that he's human too, that if there's anything, to break the heroic caricature of these people, that they all had moments of weakness, and that the loved ones we're talking about, or also at work, the people that we get close to, help us, that they co-create us and help bring out our best. It was very moving to hear that. And I have a section where I talk about breaking those heroic caricatures, that our heroes like Peter Drucker or Jack Welch all had failures, very obvious failures along the way. That the great ones, it's not that they get it right every time, it's just that they get it right more than anybody else for a longer period of time than anybody else. But you can list their failures and they sound incompetent, but they're just human.